said a lot before and I didn't bother to record. So let's go ahead with business and see where that leads us. So here we then have what? We then have what? The delay. So to then carry out what? The delay, you can do a dot then, and then you can do what? If there is what? A result, right? You have what? The arrow function there, and you close. And if there is a dot catch, right? You have what? The dot catch right there. So again, you can see that arrow functions make the writing of our dot then and the writing of our dot catch to be easy. So you can catch a particular result that is returned, and then you can console.log it, or you can catch what a particular what error that is being returned and what return what the error. And to make it neat in terms of reading, right, we can then do what? Make it look neat. And we said what? Catch or finally is not compulsory, but if you want to also run a function, a code, right, and then you can put a finally there. So irrespective of whether it was dot then that is called or a dot catch that is run, right, your finally will always run, but it will only run after what the dot then or the dot catch has happened. It will only run after the dot then or the dot catch as what has happened. That is what your what? That is your what? Your promises. That is an example of us creating what? Promises on our own. Then if you want to what? Write your set interval. So set interval means that what? Let's just set interval to run after every 1 second. So what will happen is that what? It will just be displaying what? Sorry. Did I ask you to run all of this? No, I didn't ask you to write this one. So what this means is that what does this interval mean? It means that after every 1 second, you will be seeing this console.log. After every 1 second, you will see this console.log. After every 1 second, you will see the console.log. So if you look at my what? If you look at my computer here, you will see that what? After every 1 second, right? After every 1 second, right? It is logging consistently. Logging. It is consistently what? Logging. So that is an example of what? Of you using what? Your set what? Your set interval. Set interval will constantly be logging things. Set interval will constantly be logging things. Set interval will constantly logging things after a particular what? Duration. And the thing again with this, all this interval is that what? You can save them into a variable, right? And say what? Interval, right? Interval ID. And then once you are done, you can clear that interval ID. Right? The idea is for you to clear and make sure what you are clearing everything that is happening properly, so that in case there's no what, in case there's no problem. And that is the work of what? Your interval. Your interval. That is the work of what? Your interval. Right there. That is the work of what? Your interval. Right there. So yeah, you want to. The interval is always good when you want to clean up, right? When we get to React, that's when like the interval makes a lot of sense, right? But if it's not inside maybe somewhere you want to clean up, the interval is just a way to clear what that interval from the memory of your computer. That is what the interval is doing. And the reason why you want to clear it is to avoid what you want to avoid memory leak, right? That is, you want your interval to be garbage collected by the JavaScript compiler, so that the compiler does not just keep as many intervals in its memory when it's not even using them anymore. So when you refresh the page, it's good for us to always discard the set interval or your set timeout and start afresh. To discard them and start afresh. So these are examples of ways to use what your set interval, and we can create a promise version of this set interval, because don't forget, after we created the set timeout, right, we also created the promise version of that set timeout. But we can also create a promised version of what the set interval. Can anybody create a promise version of our set interval for us? Promised based interval. And I think the computer is even, the AI is there turning it out for us. So you have the interval, the time, and then you have what your new promise, right? You have your new promise. Then to call this interval now, how do we call the interval? You call the interval, and then there must be what? A dot then, a dot catch, and what? A finally, depending on whatever operation you want to carry out. Right there. So that is what your either what your callback based interval or set timeout or the promised based version of them. And right there again, to look at what your promise. We also have some other methods under promise. You have your promise.all, right? So what does promise.all do? It waits for all the promise to be resolved, or if any one of them is to be rejected, it sort of waits for them. Then you have what? A promise.raise. Promise.raise wait for the first promise to be what? Resolved or reject. Then we have what? Promise.all settled. What is promise.all settled? Wait for all promise. Wait until all promise are settled, whether it may resolve or it may what? It may what? Reject. While there is promise.any, promise.any wait for any promise to be what? Resolved. And I think the one that is maybe majorly useful is that promise.all or promise.all settled. They're always kind of like very useful in a sense. So it means that you want to fetch posts, and then you want to fetch what? To-dos from a particular API. So you can write what? A function to fetch posts. And I think I'm going to be fetching posts from my own API. So we can have what? API dot dot dev / posts, I think. So this will fetch posts, and then we can have what? Another version of this as well that also fetch what? Task, fetch to do, and then it's kind of what I think my task endpoint is called, my to do is called tasks, right? So this is what example of what two things. But the way these two things will happen is that the computer will run these two things separately. So let's say after this fetch post, you also call this, and it means that what? It will run them separately. Run this one, after it is done, it will then go and run this one. But with the help of what? Promise.all, right? We can do what? With the help of our promise.all, we can what? We can do promise dot what? Promise dot what? Dot all, and then you can pass the two things there. And then you can do a dot then to also follow them up, right? You can do a dot then to follow them up, and that will what? So you can either what? Console.log both operations, and what? You can do a dot catch as well to what? Console.log both operations. So that is what your promise.all. That is, it will carry these two things and let them happen in parallel. Again, it will let them happen where? In what? Parallel. It will let them happen in parallel. Let me clean up most of these timeouts I have that is just running. So that is what your what? Promise.all. And the same thing when you have what? Your promise.any, right? What promise.any is trying to tell you that what? The first one that comes through between these two promise, right, is going to what? And then you have what? Promise.what? All settled. You have what? Promise.what? All settled, right? Promise.what? All settled. That is, it will wait for what? All of them to settle or to reject, depending on what the situation. It will wait for all of them to settle or to reject, depending on what the situation. That is what your promise.what? That is promise.all settled. All right. promise dot what all settled. Promise dot all settled. All right. All right. So what other thing should we talk about? Let's see. These are examples of the promise API. Then your promise dot try that I just showed you as well. Promise dot try is also under what? The promise dot try is also under the promise dot try is also under what? This new promised method as well. The promise dot try is under what? But promise.try is also very, like I said, promise.try might not work in all the browsers where you want to check whether it is working in all the browsers, right? Promise.try, and then you want to be careful. It must be what another callback inside of your promise dot what dot try. It must be a callback that is inside what your promise.try right there. Then we have promisifying. So what promisifying means is promisifying is a process of converting something that is callback based to something that is should now what return promise. Most of the time, many APIs inside your Node.js, they are callback based. So they often give us a way to promisify them. That is, you can convert something that uses callback, convert it to now what use what promises. And there's always what a helper, which is what a util dot what promisify. That is, your fs.read is callback based, but it will now what begin to behave like a promise because we have turned it to what the promised version. And that is why we can now do what read the particular file using this encoding and do the dot then and do the dot catch. So that is what you're promisifying of. And then you can also write it, you can write the promisifying yourself too. Sometimes you saw the way I converted my set timeout from normal timeout to a promised version. So it depends on what you need. Then the micro task, right? The micro tasks. So when you look at this example now, here you have what start, then you have what this promise dot resolve, and then the console.log. Well, you will know that because this is a promise, it will not happen instantly, right? This will first start, and then you will see what end before you now see what promise dot what resolve. That is the computer, the JavaScript compiler will first log your start, will then read this one and send it to what? It will send it to the event pool. The event pool will see that, oh, it's a promise, and then it will go and keep it and wait for it to complete execution. And that's why we said, well, it will take this into what the micro task, right? While it will now go ahead and see console and say, okay, I can run start, I can run end, but that promise resolved, I need to wait for it before what I display the result. And the reason why it is waiting for it is because it's a promise. So most times it will either be fetching data from an API, it will go to the API and go and fetch the data, and then when the data is fetched, finished, then it will return back what the data. But the simple story beside them is what they are what micro tasks. Promises are micro tasks. Your event will take the micro tasks. They don't happen instantly. The computer takes them and takes them to another section inside the compiler to go and what operate on them what later run. Then you have what your async and await. We have what our async and await. What is async and await? Considering all that we've talked about so far, what is async and await? The process to create a callback is long. The process to create a promise is long. True or false? The process to create a promise is long. That is, you have to do what your new capital promise constructor, open bracket, and do the resolve and reject, right? It is long. So in a way to avoid that long process, then JavaScript gave us a way called what your async what function. That is, you now have a function that can return a promise automatically. You have what a function that can what return what a promise automatically. So anytime there's a normal function in JavaScript and you put async in front of it, automatically this will now start to what return what. So even if you put return string here, if you put return string here, even though it is returning string, if you hover on it, right, it will tell you that what I'm going to return what the promise of what? String. That is because I can see this async in front of me automatically. What that means is that what I am supposed to wait, process, right, and wait for some certain time before I go ahead and display what? My result. Does that make sense? So async and await gives us what? A much more clean syntax on how to what? To create a promise. And also, instead of verse to what? Because this can now be treated as a promise, and then you can use the dot then, the dot cut, and the dot finally. But now, instead of us also doing this long approach, right, to also make it clean, they now gave us what? Another approach to say, oh, we can now use what? The await what? We can do what? The await what? Await. So what this means is that what? You can just what? In some compiler, you can just write await here and do fetch data like this, and it will work. And in some compilers, it will not work. The reason why this will work in some compilers is because what? There is what? There is global what? There's global async and await, right? Global async, global await, right? There's global await enabled. That is top level. It's called top level, not global. It's called what? Top level what? Top level await. Is if top level await is enabled in your compiler, you can go ahead and do this. But if it is not enabled, right, what you want to do is what? You want to do what? An immediately invoked function. How many of us have heard of that before? An immediately invoked function. How many persons have heard of that before? That is a function that instantly calls itself. A function that instantly calls it. So when you look at this function, it's a function like this, but you can see that instantly it is calling itself, right? So in there, we can then go like this and then put what? Duplicate this and put this inside. And to put this inside, we can then do what? Async here. Because the truth is that you cannot what? You cannot call await inside a function without making sure that the function is compatible to accept what? Async. Again, don't forget, you cannot call async on any function except what? You cannot call what? Async function except what? You cannot call await on something except what? The function by itself is an async. The function must either be what? Be async, right? Or it must be what? A promise compatible before you can await a particular operation. How many of us have promised somebody that you're going to marry them in this class? Do we have anybody in this class? You have promised somebody that you're going to marry them. You've written a covenant of promise to marry somebody. I say, don't worry, when I get money, when all this code that I'm writing now, when it makes sense, when I blow, right, I will marry you. It's a promise. But you can either fulfill the promise or you can either what? Reject the promise. Is that correct? We can either fulfill the promise or we can reject the promise, right? It's either the promise is fulfilled. When the promise is fulfilled, it is fulfilled because there is a resolve. And when the promise is what is not fulfilled, is because there is what? A reject. And what is related to what? Your resolve. A dot then should accompany what? Your resolve, while a dot catch should accompany what? Your reject. Am I communicating? So for promises, you know, right? It's either the promise is in pending state, or it is fulfilled, or it is what? It is what? It's either it is what? Fulfilled, or it is what? Rejected. Right? So again, promise is what? Just a function that we don't know when it will return the result. A callback is what? A function that we run when a particular decision is made. Right? When a certain decision is made, it calls itself back. While the promise is like, I don't know when I will return my result, but I just know that I'm a function. An example is they ask me to go to the database to go and fetch something. I don't know the speed of the internet. I don't know how many minutes it will take me to return information, but I will still go until I come back with information. That's when I have arrived back. So anything I have to do with what? Timing, read writing, go and read a particular .txt file, read a .js file, read a .py file inside of the computer. You don't know how fast the computer CPU is to know when the promise, when that function will actually what happen. So that way they call them promises, and they are sent to a special place right in the micro task section of what your JavaScript compiler, and that is where what the ordering and the organization of these promises are what they made. And we said for async and await is much more clean syntax compared to what your promises. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? The reason why you have promises again and async and await is because of something called what the callback hell, right? You can see that what if we enter into callback hell, you might not know what you are doing anymore. So that way we have what a promise. A promise helps us to what to make things a little bit easier now. So you have your promise.resolve, promise.reject, right? And then you have what the tenable, right? The tenable or the rejected, right? Is that how you say, okay, there's a promise, I can now await that operation. And there's what it does what reject or it does resolve. Like I talked about the methods, and this is what we're talking about what static methods now. Then you have what your advanced async and await pattern. So here you can see that yeah, right, because there's async here, this is already a promise, but inside of that async you can do an await of the delay, you do another await of the delay, and then you return the operation. And the same thing with what parallel, right? When this happened in parallel. So I've said it before that for parallel, promise.all make things parallel. That is, both of them will start at the same time, and it will return when the last operation is what completed. It will return when the last operation is what completed. And then you have what some common pitfalls that you should what be careful, right? Anytime you are working with promise, right? Forgetting to return promises in what the chain. So here, because if you look at this line here, it looks as though there is no error on this line. But any good JavaScript engineer will know that there is an error. Right, because this curly bracket that we're having here, if you're going to use curly bracket, there must be what to return. There must be a return here. There must be a return here. And that's why what you see that in the next one, we are not using the curly bracket here, because instantly when you don't use the curly bracket, right, JavaScript helps you to return. The JavaScript engine helps you to return. Also, it tells us to avoid mixing your callback with promises. It tells you to avoid mixing your callback approach and your promise approach together. And another thing is don't have unhandled promise, right? Unhandled promise, whether it is the fulfill or the reject part, make sure you are handling them. And how do you handle them? You do a dot then, and you do a dot catch. You do a dot then, and we do a dot catch. So that is the length and breadth of your callbacks, promises, and we have please, is it only on promise that the curly braces is required? No, that's a pure JavaScript thing, because there is a difference between your one-liner arrow function and your ordinary arrow function. For example, your arrow function can say const add to be equals to this is a one-liner arrow function. You can see that there is no curly bracket here, but if I want to add curly brackets here, what do? If I want to add your curly brackets there, I want to put my curly brackets there and take return to the next line. There must be a return. The moment I had curly bracket, there must be a return. But without the return, right, you can so one is called implicit, and one is called explicit. One is called implicit and one is called explicit. All right, any other question? Any other JavaScript question? Any other JavaScript questions? You can feel free to unmute your mic to speak if you want to. Any other JavaScript question? Basic APIs. Should we go deeper on APIs, making API calls? GraphQL APIs, WebSocket, real-time, SSE, server-side events, event emitter, pop-subs. What else? Like, feel free to ask me basic JavaScript questions, basic JavaScript fundamentals, things that are missing. So please, everything you mentioned now, I don't know them. I mean, I can't still talk about everything, but I think the idea to some of them is that there is a material that I have as well here. So what I have here is what it's just like an API where I have like a list of APIs that you can use to play with different APIs. But those of you who are not used with to APIs, right? This is API. Anytime you hear the word API, API refers to what? What does API refers to? Anybody? API refers to what? A first API can mean two things. Maybe I should break it down to say that API can mean two things. And the first is that API can mean what? Application programming interface. That is, to use a particular API, to use a particular programming language, a method, you need to understand the APIs made available. So if we go to MDN and we say web APIs, these are the list of what? These are the list of what? APIs that are available within your what? The browser. There is something called background fetch. There is audio output API. That is, there is badging API. There is barcode detection. You know that there is barcode detection in your browser, right? I know most of them don't support it yet, right? But some have support and some don't have support, right? But what I'm saying is that this API is what is telling us that, oh, you can use your browser, like inside of your browser, you can create a web application that can scan barcode, right? You can create a web application that can scan barcodes, right, within your, and this is now the explanation of how to do it. That is, there will now be what? Interfaces. There will be interfaces. That is, there will be what? A part. So one of the interface here is what? Barcode detector, and it has its own constructor. It has what? Static methods, and it has what? Static instances. Some of them we also have what? Is you have what? Methods, and to have what? Methods and properties. Some of them will have properties and some of them will have static properties depending on them. But the idea is that this is what tells me how to use what? The barcode, what? The barcode inside of what? The browser. So that is what API. Does that make sense? That is, there are use of features that are inside of my browser. List and tons and thousands of features that are inside my browser, but there is a standard API documentation that explains all the methods that are available. In your document, there is document.querySelector, right? That is an API. There is document.getElement by class name. There is document.what? Which other one do we have now? There is, I think we talked about append, right? We talked about prepend. We talked about element.insert adjacent HTML, insert adjacent element. Like these are methods that are available within the document. Within the document. So if I go back again and we go to document, you will see that what there's a particular API called document. There will be document object model API. And this is what explains to me all the DOM related stuff. So whether it is what your HTML element DOM or your SVG DOM. And this is the only JavaScript that some of you know. And this is not a shade on some of you, though. But I know that this is the only JavaScript that some of you know. You only just know how to do DOM. Because that's the only thing you have been watching on video. But JavaScript is more than the DOM, right? For sure. JavaScript DOM is just one tiny 1% of what the web is capable of doing. Yes, it seems to be plenty, but there is clipboard. It means you can copy. There is Canvas. Canvas explains how to use JavaScript to manipulate what your Canvas element. So you can either use it to draw shapes, use it to style, use it to do image, use it to capture your video. That is with Canvas, and that is within what your JavaScript. And there are libraries that makes Canvas easy, and that's why you have all these libraries that even if the browser's API, that is the interfaces and the methods that the browser made available, if they are too complex, then right, some developers like me and you will go and create libraries, npm packages that you can use that make our life easy. Right. So again, do we understand the concept of APIs? Do we understand the first basic concept of API? Right? It's a programming interface that exposes to us how to do things within any programming language. Do we understand APIs? Can I get some thumbs up? And I said APIs is not limited to DOM, right? I said it again, like API is not limited to your DOM, D-O-M. APIs can be I think there is which other one? I think there's service worker, there's web workers, there's service worker, there's web workers, there is CSS API as well, CSS some, right? There is compression, there's the console, there's the contact picker, there's the device orientation, device posture, picture in picture. Like, look at the things that your browser can do, the file API, the file system, the fetch, right? The full screen, the gamepad. You can connect a gamepad to a website and build something with JavaScript for it, right? Geolocation, right? The drag and drop, the history API, the idle detection. Like, you have not used a web page for 5 minutes, what should happen? The ink, the intersection observer, the invoker commands, the JS self-profiling, the keyboard API, this is much. And that is why I usually tell people that many of us don't know JavaScript. What you know is just document.query selector. That's the only thing you have known all your life. And that's the only thing that you are focused on. But the truth with it is JavaScript is way much bigger than the DOM. JavaScript is how to interact with the web browser, how to build something beautiful, something powerful within the web browser. And to do that, you need to understand the different APIs, that is the different textbook definitions of, if you want to do geolocation here and you want to know your longitude and latitude, this is how we should do it. That is an API. And so even when other people start creating npm packages as well, right? If you download somebody's npm package, you need to go and read the documentation, true or false. You need to read the documentation, right? So that you know how to use that npm package that you just downloaded. For example, we are learning React. Why? Because React was written by some people, and because React has its own methods, its own APIs. So we need to learn React. So what we are learning in React is we're learning the API of how to do things within the React ecosystem. Am I communicating? Am I communicating? So that is the first basic definition of what your API is. And now, when we're now talking about building front end and back end, there can be an API that is pointing to a database. Am I saying something? There can be an API that is pointing to where? Where is it pointing to? A database. A place where you can store information. So it means that now, if you, the front-end engineer, somebody fills the form and you want to submit the form to a particular place, what will you use to send information to that database? It is through the API that a back-end engineer has built, and that's why they call you the front-end engineer. So you, the front-end engineer, requires a back-end And the backend guy will create the database on their own end and give you a means, a ladder that can connect your front end to what the backend. And that's what many of us know as API. So that is what the second layer of what your API, and that is divided into different categories, because you have what the REST APIs, you have what the GraphQL APIs, and you have what the TRPC or the RPC, the remote procedure control, right? The remote procedure controls. So it can be the TR or the OR or the gRPCs. They are remote procedure controls. They are also what a kind of APIs. REST is what is very common. REST APIs. And so when a backend guy builds something, they will give you what a documentation. They should give you a documentation that looks like this. They should give you what a documentation that looks like this. They should give you a documentation that looks like. Can you see my screen, please? You can see my screen. All right, so they should give you a documentation that looks like this, right? Then the documentation will now tell you how to use the API. So here you can see there is a get, right? There's get, there's post, there's patch, there's delete, and there is a /task, like. So this is the methods, and this is the paths, or what we call the route. So if you want to get all the tasks here, right, this is the API. So when you click on it like this, it will tell us that, okay, if you click on this and you do a fetch, or you use Axios to fetch something from this, right, this is what the data that will be returned will look like. And the method that is being returned here is called 200, right? If there is a failure, right, it will tell you that the method returned here is 422. And this is what the structure will look like. So it is the backend person that creates all of this, right? And then you, the front end, will need to have a reference, a documentation to what the backend has created that guides you, right, on how to interact with what they have built. Am I making sense, please? Am I making sense? Am I making sense? Or do we have any question? Am I making sense? Should I continue the explanation? All right. So like I was saying earlier again, a backend guy gives you this kind of documentation, then it is you that will now study the documentation and then know how to use the documentation. So again, this documentation says that there are query parameters. It says that you can pass a query call all. So if you don't want something like a pagination, you can pass all, and it says that the default to this all is false. You can pass a page, which is an integer, which is a minimum of 1, and the default is 1. So you can pass page 2, page 3, page 4, and you can even pass a limit. A limit tells me the limit of what that page can return. You can pass status to fetch all the to-dos that are all the tasks that are to do, that are in progress, that are done, or they are cancelled. Or you can fetch priority, the ones that are low, the ones that are medium. So again, you can see that this documentation explains how to talk to this this backend, this URL that is pointing to a particular backend that the backend engineers have built. Our task as front-end engineers is to convert a Figma designs, true or false. Your first task will be to convert a Figma design, right? HTML, CSS, or use your React or Vue.js or any other front-end framework. The next task after that will be to connect whatever interface that you have created to make it functional by connecting it to a particular backend. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So your next task will be after converting the UI, writing the HTML, CSS, and React or Vue or whatever you use to do the front end. Then you need to now plug and play and make it functional. So if there's a form, right, somebody must be able to click on submit on the form and it will do something, right? If there is a table, the table must be populated with the real information. If there's a chat, if there is a conversation with AI or whatever, if there is a call like this now, a share screen, right? That share screen functionality has to work right? So your job again is what build, convert the design, and make sure that what the design you converted is what functional for our users what to be able to what to use. Am I communicating, please? Am I communicating? So again, I said for the different kind of APIs that we have what REST, right? Which is the one that has this what documentation like that looks like this. It might not always look like this. It might. This one is using a particular system of documentation called Swagger, right? And it allows me to test inside of it. It uses Scalar. Sorry, it's using something called Scalar. So like this, I can press play like this, and it will, you see that what it will return what all this information back, and it can tell me what the total number of to-dos that I have. The total is what 170 is what 1726, right? The page is what I am on page 1, and it is limiting by what 10, right? The total number of pages that are available is what 173. And do I have what the next page to be what true? Is there a previous page? No, there's no previous page. So if I want to fetch page 2, I change this to what 2, right? And send this now, and then it will fetch page 2, and then you will know that what the page that we're dealing with here is now what page 2. And if I don't want to fetch everything, I just want to fetch, if I want to fetch everything, sorry, I can just change this all to be what? Change all to be what? To be true. And then it will try to fetch all the 1072 information. And then you can see it will be very, 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 very long right here. So with this kind of interface, you are able to test out what the API. With this interface, you're able to test out this. How many of us have played with an API documentation like I just did now before? How many persons here in this class have played with an API interface or API documentation like this, whether with Postman or with any tool? Postman, any tool. There are different tools that we can use to play with them. Has anybody done something like that before in this class? Anybody? Nobody. Is it? Am I getting a nobody? Nobody has done something with. Nobody. Can I get a thumbs down to be sure that it's nobody? Let me be sure that you guys is. Oh my God, you guys are scaring me. So you've not heard of like any APIs and play with it and interacted with it before? So let's say for this task here now, I want to create a task. I then need to go to a post. You can see that post, we use post to create. So if I send it now and say and send post, what will it say? It will come back and say what? It will come back and come up with an error and say too small, right? Expected what? At least one character. So what is the problem? It says that what is expecting which field? Name. The part that is expecting is name. So it means that what there must be something here and say what to do with what my student. Or let's say teach my student what REST API. Teach my student REST what REST API. And then if I play this as well now and send, and then you will see that what it has created. And this is the ID of what was created. This is the ID of what was created. Copy. Yes. Right. And then I can now what? View. That is, I can get by ID. You can see that this get is different from this get, and it's different from this get. This get is saying that what? You can pass me what? Pass me what? An ID. So add a value. and pass me something like this and what, send this, and then it will fetch what, that new information that has just been created. And with patch, what patch is saying is that what, I can update it. I can update what, I can update it. Patch is saying that what, I can update it and say I can change the name to what, teach what, my student what, student about what, API, right, version 2. And now I can add a description and say description. Yes, they need to be prepared to be great what, great front what, front end engineers. What else apart from description? What else can we add? We can add start and end date, right? You can add the duration, you can set priority. You can just set any of these operations here depending on whichever one you want to set. And it's archived to be what, false, right? False. Set it to be what, to be false. Let's the priority to be what, to be high, right? And then we can update this to do, and then it is updated. So archived is false, status is to do, priority is high, right? And then the time it was created and the time it was updated, you can see what, the time has changed. And then there can be what, an owner right there. So this is what, me interacting what, with an API. And the reason why I have this API again is to teach you the front end, because again, at the end of the day, we usually run into this problem where the front end people don't know how an API looks like and what to expect from an API. But I think for those who are in class today now, you know exactly what and what you could expect from an API documentation from what, a backend developer. So a backend developer should give you what, a documentation that looks like this, and you should be able to test the API like this, where you can either delete. So if I want to delete what I just created now, right, I can what, delete it as well, right? Delete is a 204. I think delete will do, it will be a 204. Let's just do add value and paste it there and press enter and then send it now. So it should give me a 204, no content, right? So for no content. So if I try to fetch it back again, I'm going to get what, a 404. So it has been what, deleted. And this is what, this is just with task API. So I can play with products to create product. Do I have product? I'm not sure I have any product. Yeah, there should be empty array. For tasks, for posts, I'm not sure I have posts as well. It should be empty array. Okay, there's one post, right? And there's authentication, there's analytics, and there's all these. So just different things for you to play with, just so that you can understand what an API basically look like. And this one that we are playing with is what we call the REST what, API. RE what, that is what, object representation state transfer protocol, right? The way it works is that it uses method and this part to determine the operation is going to what, carry out. A get means you want to get something. A post means you want to create something. A get with an ID means you want to fetch a particular thing, right? And a patch means you want to update. Patch put, you want to update, while delete means you want to delete what, that particular resources. But again, it is what, the backend guy that gives you this. The reason why I can probably work on this is because of, like, I'm a full stack engineer, right? I'm able to create both the backend and what, the front end, you know, of any application, as the case may be. Should I quickly show you GraphQL? I quickly show you GraphQL. So GraphQL is another kind of API that is also similar, because I said what, the second API is divided into two. Like I said, the API that the backend guy gives to you, they're divided into two. You have what, your three. I said they're divided into three. For those who are following, I said we have what, the REST, right, which is what, object representational state transfer protocol. Then we have GraphQL, right, which is, it uses a graph system. It uses a graph system to represent what, the data that you're trying to get. And then you have what, the RPCs, the remote procedure control. That is, the remote procedure control just takes what, a function that you have written locally and turns it into what a API. That is, it's just like it takes a normal add number function that you have, and it turns it into what, an API that you can call from your front end. So that is what, so, and you have different variants of your RPCs. whether you have what, I think you have what, the TRPC, which is a typed RPC. Then you have what, the ORPC. I think ORPC is from Google. And then I think there's a gRPC too, if I'm correct as well. They are just different kind of systems to talk to databases majorly, or to carry out what different kind of operations. So for GraphQL now, GraphQL, this API here is REST, so this is not useful for GraphQL again. So what I did is that I also built something for GraphQL as well for you to be able to test. So if you go to the landing page that we got to, where's the landing page again? Here, if you go to the landing page that we have here, and you go to what? Where's the GraphQL? So this should be a GraphQL here. So go to GraphQL endpoint, or GraphQL playground. It will tell you, yeah, it will tell you that you cannot view the playground. So what you can do is, if you click on this, so what we can do is you can go to Altia. I think there should be web.altia, right? Altia.dev, right? So this altia.dev is a GraphQL provider. I could use Postman or Insomnia or any other services as well, but these are just the ones that I would basically use. So this Altia is, I can then put what? I can put a URL inside called what? api.oluwashitemi.dev / what? GraphQL. Can we see this? / what? GraphQL. So when you do a / GraphQL at the end, it allows us to what? To see what a GraphQL documentation. And what a GraphQL will have is a GraphQL documentation will now have what? 3 things. A GraphQL documentation has 3 things. It's supposed to have what? It's supposed to have 3 things. It should have query, mutation, and subscription. It should have 3 things: query, mutation, and what? Subscription. Are you guys still with me? Are you guys still with me? Are you guys still with me, please? Okay. So the GraphQL system contains of 3 major things: the query, the mutation, and the what? Subscription. The GraphQL system contains of what? The query, the mutation, and the subscription. And pay attention to the query. The query is what? Creating of things. So if you look at all the things here, it's like it tells me if I want to create an account, if I want to create a single account, if I want to, query means to fetch something. Query says fetch. So if you want to fetch all the accounts that are existing. So an example is task. If you want to fetch all the tasks, you use what? This API. And then you can do offsets, you can do limit, you can order by, you can say where, right? And if you want to fetch a single thing, right there. So an example is what? Fetch. Look at this query here. This query says what? Fetch what? All what? Tasks. So to fetch all these tasks here, I can then do a play like this here. And you will see that what? It is listing all the tasks that I have. But you will notice that it is only returning ID. And this is the beauty of GraphQL. Because I told it to return what? Only ID. So if I want it to return more than the ID, and I want it to return the title of all of what? Is it title or? Yeah, there should be title. Is it name or title? There must be something for the to-dos. So if I wanted to return the ID and the name of the to-do, they need to go ahead and return what? Their ID and their name. And the reason why, this is the reason why GraphQL is beautiful, is because you can tell it to return the exact thing that you want. Are you following me, please, class? Are you with me? So that is the beauty of what GraphQL brings to the table. You are able to tell the backend to return only the exact thing that you need. So in this case, I could tell it to return what? ID and name. And for all the 1072 tasks that I have, it will return everything like that for me directly. And if I want to limit it now, right? If I want to limit it, I could now tell it and say, okay, there's a way to pass what? The documentation says I can pass offset, right? Which is what? Offset. I think it should be like this, if I'm correct. Offset should be 10. Is it like this? Not here. That's the wrong place to pass the offset. You pass it here and you say what? Offset, and then you can say offset is what? 10. So it means that what? Or let's just say 4 for now. So it means that what? What do you think it will do? Anybody? It will only return what? 4 things. So you say, okay, offset, there's an error close to offset. What is the error close to offset? Is it that is it supposed to be equals to, or is he expecting a string? Let's just do this. Offset, or is he expecting it to be 4 like this? Is he expecting it to have curly bracket like this? I don't know. Oh, okay. I think I know what it wants. I think I know what it wants. It said it's an integer. So I don't know. Let's see. Offset should be 4. Then limit should be, the limit should be what? Limit should be let's say 2. So what this means is that it should run now, all things being equal. Okay, so you can see that what? It will skip the first 4 and then it will only return 2. So if I turn this to 0 again, let's turn this to 0, which is the default. This is the first 2, right? The first what? The first 3, right? So you have a fine-grained way to what? It's just a fine-grained way to what? To declare. You can see that what? You can declare what exactly you want, and that is what GraphQL brings to the table, right? That is exactly what GraphQL brings to the table. Again, don't forget, when you go to a tool like web.orchia, or if you go to Postman, or if you go to any tool that you're using, the URL that you should put, it has to end with a /GraphQL, because that is what the requirement. And then you can fetch a single to do, right? You can fetch a single to do, right? You can see you're fetching where ID is equals to, so it looks more descriptive in a way, right? You're fetching a single to do where ID is equal to what? So you can fetch where something is greater or equals to, right? And give me the name, give me the the ID, give me its default, and give me what is what. So these are the beautiful things that what GraphQL, brings to what. So this is a single to do, all the to do. If you want to register a user, or you want to log in a user, you want to see the currently logged in user and all of that. But these are the list of all the things that you can do with the query part of what. And what I mean by query means what? You want to fetch what? All the information. I think if I had this one here, it adds to the top. Did it add to the top or the bottom? So it adds the query here, and I can wrap it with a query, and then we can say name is what? Users right there. And this can fetch all the users that we have in the system. So if you run it, it will fetch what? All the users that we have in the system right there. So it's able to fetch what? All the users that you have in the system and all of that, like that. So that is what that is your I think, because I'm limiting to 1, so if you fetch 10, I think we should get more users than this in a sense, right? So you're able to see more than you're able to see more than Adewale Abati. Sorry, Adewale Abati. Sorry, that name sounds familiar. Adewale Abati. Is it the same person that I know? Okay, okay, okay. What is an OG senior developer looking for? What is he looking for from my what is Adewale looking for from my API? Adewale works at Block. Adewale works at Block. He's a big boy. Adewale is a big boy. Don't mind him. Yeah, he works at Block. Is SKD. SKD is a big boy in the Nigerian tech space though. But I think I know why it might be there because I think I submitted an application to some company recently. So that must have been the reason. I think he's reviewing the applications, and that led him to test the API and all of that. So what led to the whole story is that there's GraphQL, and the part that I just showed you is what query in GraphQL. The second part in your GraphQL is mutation. Who can guess what mutation is? Mutation. Mutation is now a way to what? Mutation is now a way to what? To create, right? To create something, to mutate or to create something. Mutation is a way to what? To create or mutate something. And mutations are very what's it called? They are very funny as well. So to see the documentation of mutation, you come to home and then you go to what? Mutation. And then if you go to mutation and you can always see, you can insert into document, you can insert into account or insert into account single, you can update account, you can delete from account, you can insert into post, you can update post or you can delete from post. You can do all this kind of thing, but you can see that it is what they create, the update, and then the delete. There's something called CRUD. How many of us have heard of CRUD before? CRUD, prod. So you can see that there is what? Create, read, update, and delete. So create, update, and the CUD, they are under mutation, while the read is under query. Does that make sense? CUD is under where? Mutation, right? And while our read is under where? Query. So if I want to create a post now, right, I can use the same documentation that we have. We can use it to create, right? Use this to create. Use this to create. Where's create now? Let's say we want to create a task or create a post. Right, and there are other ones too. Let's say other simpler ones. But the idea of this is that it will tell you. I think if you click on each one of them, it will also tell you what argument you should pass, what it will return, the fields that it will return, and all of those interesting details that is able to pass. But let's do one mutation. Do I have any mutation here? Okay, register. Let's just register. Let's just say Team Yuka 25, and then the password is this. Yeah, let's just register this as well, and then that should. As it's taking, it should never take this long. It should never take this long. But that's annoying. It's crazy annoying. As a backend person, that shit took too long. But again, you can see that's like it's creating the users, like it's able to create user. And so once the users are created, we can then use that user to log in, right? You can just log in those users to test those users. And whether it is a post that you want to create, whether it's a to-do that you want to create, you're able to create all these amazing users. So and the last part, who wants to guess what the last part is going to be? The subscription. Who wants to guess what the subscription is going to be like? Subscription. Who wants to guess what the subscription is going to look like? So the subscription is a way to get notified when a particular action happens. Did you hear that? The subscription is a way to what? To get notified when a particular what? When a particular what? Action happened. And what are the actions that can happen? The action is like when a task is created, when a task is updated, when a task is deleted, when a product is created, when a product is updated, when a product is deleted, when a product is created. So all of these, right? These are what? Like events, things that you can get notified for. So something like when you see your apps that have notifications. Some of us have seen apps that have notifications, right? Right, all of these things you get notified like when certain thing happens. An example is you can go to the WebSocket part of this same project as well, and you can view this you can view this now. So this one is what you can connect here, and what this means is that anytime I create a task, let's say we create a task, let's go to our let's create our task with REST. Let's go to another API dot rushstream.dev and go to this one here, and let's just create a task briefly like we created a task earlier from post here, and then we give it a name, test 2 3, right? And you press play like this here. And then you will notice here that what? This place got notified of what was created. And that is an example of what? This is using WebSocket, right? And the same way, if I was listening to the GraphQL operation of task complete, let's say I was listening to this now, if I had this subscription to the page, let's say I had this subscription here, sample right here, and I play this here. So what it would do is that what don't I have this configured? I'm not sure I have this configured, but it's supposed to use the default URL and point to it. So it will get notified. I think it should get notified by www.api.graphql. I think it should be api.lua/dev/GraphQL. I think that should be the URL. Or I can use this. I'm not sure what I can use this too. But let's see if it's this. So again, what that subscription is all about is that it will listen and pay attention. Okay, it cannot listen to that, so I can adjust that settings. There's a settings there to oh, it's been a while I've come here to play with this. There's a way to fix this. I can't remember how to fix it anymore, but there's certainly a way to fix that. Whether it is a query, a subscription, and all that. I can't remember how to. But I know it has a way for me to fix it right there. But the idea of subscription is something similar to what you have here. You just get notified anytime something happens. You get notified anytime when something happens. And it's used majorly for your notification. It's used for real-time conversation, all this kind of beautiful information. That's what you use your subscription for. So do we understand the base for GraphQL? GraphQL has how many Bs? 3 Bs. You have what? You have your what? Your query. You have your what? Mutation. And then you have what? Your subscription. Subscription is not very, very much common, but it's because it is quite very hard to implement. That's why it's not very common. And that's why if you go again to all of the things I've created for you on this page, there are ways for you to test. So you can view you just connect here and you go to the you go to the REST API, and then you can create. So anytime you create, but the idea of the socket is that it is only working for what? Creation, updating, and delete, because that's the only time you want to get notified majorly, right? The only time you want to get notified is maybe when something was created, when something was what, maybe that's the times that you want to get notified in a way. So do we understand a little bit about REST and what? Do you understand a little about REST and a little about GraphQL today? Do you get a little gist of what REST and GraphQL? And so if you want to kind of like play with them, because I've not talked about writing code for them, I'm just talking about even just understanding them and being able to try them out. Then before we now say, okay, how can we write JavaScript code to talk to what? A REST API? How can we write JavaScript code to talk to a GraphQL API? How can we write a GraphQL code to fetch from a WebSocket or from a subscription? Right there. So, and the last part is TRPC. I don't have anything majorly for you to test TRPC, but I think subsequently I should have something for you next time for you to be able to test what TRPCs or the RPCs, the remote procedure control. The remote procedure control. So that is it. I think we can bring it in. We can bring this knowledge to a close, because I've spoken about a lot of things today. Have I? I've said a lot of things, but I hope that it will be valuable to some of you who will take it further, because I think it doesn't stop there, right? You need to just take it further a little bit. Or do we have anybody that have any question first? Anyone with any question? Anybody with any question before? Any question? Anyone with any question? You can feel free to unmute your mic if you have any question. Feel free to unmute your mic if you have any question. Feel free to unmute your mic if you have any question. Okay, so I take that as what they know. Oladimeji, thank you for joining. Olua Bukomi. Do we have questions? Again, you know, I'm begging us now. You should not come to this kind of class and don't have questions. Please, it is not good for you to come to this kind of classes without having questions. It's not good, please. It is not good. Will the side class be every Tuesday? At least for now. I'm sure it should be every Tuesday for now. For now, it should be every Tuesday for now.